Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. Former NFL wide receiver Keyshawn Johnson with his thoughts on Shedeur Sanders ending up with the Browns.
One thing about the general manager and the way that their front office is put together in Cleveland is their heavy analytic base. It's all analytics. They all so
working well for them. They were 3-14 last year.
There you go, mama. That's the problem. Like, you don't really see the talent. You looking at numbers. That's why I'm scared. I'm like, he probably the best dude, and they talking about, yeah, well, you know, he was 9-9, and you know, just the numbers. And I don't like the analytic game, man. I like to look at a dude and tell whether or not he can play football. And I don't think that those people in that building, Andrew Berry and general manager included, know football like that. I'm just saying.
Well,
no football. Well, I can look at a dude and go, oh, yeah, he a real cat. Mm-hmm. Like Shedeur. I can just look at Shedeur and go, oh, yeah, that's what I want in the locker room. I want that confidence. Yeah. I want that. Yeah. Opposed to, well, the numbers say if he completes it on this, that, 75% of the time, I don't want that. Don't tell me that.
He's in the locker room, so you got him, but we'll see how that plays out. Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider, talked about what he sees in Shedeur Sanders.
With Shedeur, you have accuracy, you have toughness, you have a guy who has been a part of building up a couple of programs, but not the biggest arm, not the biggest guy. He is not an elite athlete like his dad was. And then you've obviously got all these other questions about the type of culture shock that he's in for when he's going to be dropped into an NFL building where for the first time since he was a kid, his dad's not his coach and the accountability structures are going to be different. But if this is just a matter of lottery tickets, which are what mid-round quarterbacks are, buy the second ticket when it's on cheap and see what you get. If your worst case scenario here, Rich, with drafting Shedeur, besides, again, having immense amounts of media attention and scrutiny over how you now proceed at the quarterback position, but your worst case scenario is Shedeur comes in, he doesn't play well, and you cut him, and you're out a fifth-round pick. The upside is a guy who we were talking about until draft days. This guy gave me the third overall pick in the draft, and maybe you fall into your future starting quarterback.
Time will tell. Another guy that will be in as a rookie quarterback, one that the Browns obviously preferred, is Dillon Gabriel. He was drafted in the third round, Shedeur in the fifth. Chris Sims on what he sees in Dillon Gabriel's game.
Listen, there was things I liked about him. There is. I've talked about his arm is pretty damn strong. He's got a quick release. He's a good athlete. He definitely is. I can find him to be a little bit of a high-effort thrower sometimes when the ball has to go down the field, which means he needs space and area around him, and that's just not always there. And then I think there was also a part of me that goes, yeah, he is small, and there was plays I felt like I looked at every game where I'd go, man, that guy's kind of open down the middle, or this guy's there, but I don't think he can see him, or he's not comfortable in the pocket, so he's going to kind of move or get the ball out of his hands real quick, where I want to go, nah, like the big guy's going to stand there and push that ball down the field there, right? So those are things I just worried about with him. But I see the physical tools, but again, it's a guy it is 5'10". It's not like, oh my gosh, he's so fast, and oh my gosh, his arm's so strong, but yes, could he mess with Shedeur Sanders here and beat him out? Absolutely. I mean, he's been around some good offenses. He knows how to play quarterback in the pocket. He's very good that way. And I do think they'll push each other there, and you'll have a real duel between the two rookies there in Cleveland.
Plenty of Browns talk coming up with Sam Monson from the 33rd team, as well as Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle-Telegram. We'll move on to the Cavs. Cavs and Pacers, game one of their Eastern Conference semifinal, and it was the Pacers coming into Rocket Arena, getting out to a quick start. Here, Max Strus, little alley-oop to Evan Mobley. Mobley had 20 points. Donovan Mitchell in transition finds Jarrett Allen for the alley-oop dunk. Donovan Mitchell took 30 shots and made about half of them inside. Gets the layup. He had 33. Close game in the fourth. Tyrese Halliburton knocks down the three ball. Andrew Nembhard hits a three. Pacers shot the ball well from behind the arc. Nembhard another three. Indianapolis, Indiana. The Indiana Pacers 19 of 36 from three-point range. and they win game one, 121-112 to steal home court.
I think we finally figured it out, but in the beginning, man, they had us kind of in the blender a little bit, and we did get adjusted to it, made some adjustments, and settled down a little bit. But and then their shot making was otherworldly, and obviously we're 9 for 38, elite shot making by them. Give them a ton of credit. I think in the first half we had them in the second percentile of shot quality. Like I don't know what it finished. Like, but we're forcing tough shots. But give them credit. It's the playoffs. Yeah, good point, Joe. Took us a while to figure out their speed.
And Indianapolis, the Pacers, plus 30. They made 19 threes. Cavs made 9, plus 30 from three-point range. There's the difference. Game 2 tomorrow at Rocket Arena. Cavs need that one. Guardians wrapping up 3-game series in Toronto against Blue Jays, trying to take the series. First inning, Tanner Bybee in a little bit of trouble. Anthony Santander grounds out. They get the runner in the rundown, then they throw home, and they get Bo Bichette trying to score. In the third, Stephen Kwan, a nice running grab out in left field to take away extra bases. Still scoreless in the fourth inning as you see Kwan full extension. Bobby likes that, of course. Stephen Kwan with the catch. Here's Daniel Schneemann. Rips one down the line. It is a fair ball, and it goes as an RBI double to make it 2-0 Guardians with the lead. Still in the fourth, Gabriel Arias. Big hit, our 2-run score on the single. Arias trying to stretch it, and he's thrown out at second. Guardians hang on to win at 5-4. They take 2 out of 3. Bybee had to leave in the sixth with cramps in both legs. Bybee talked about his health in the start against the Blue Jays.
Just during warm-ups, pretty much. That's when it started.
Pre-game warm-ups or warm-ups in the
warm-ups in the sixth inning.
Yeah. This is something you've dealt with throughout your career, all the way back to college. Just have they told you anything about what needs to change in order to make this not an issue?
No, not yet. I mean, yeah, no.
How did you feel? You would work through your outing up until that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a battle outing. I mean, there's a lot of adversity today. I feel like for the most part, I did not having my best stuff, probably having my pretty bad stuff. I mean, I feel like I battled pretty well and got through 5. I feel like I could have got through 6, but obviously it sucks. But yeah. So
the Guardians take 2 out of 3 from the Blue Jays. It's on to Washington. They will start a 3-game series with the Nationals tonight. Luis Ortiz faces Jake Irvin for the Nationals. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Browns are up first. Sam Monson from the Check the Mic podcast. Talking Browns. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We begin with the Browns today on Sports4CLE. CBS Sports' Tyler Sullivan on if he thinks Kevin Stefanski, head coach of the Browns, is his job in jeopardy.
I put it at 1. It's warm, but in reality, it really should be 0, because if you use this exercise and say, okay, let's just play the game that the Cleveland Browns do fire Kevin Stefanski, the next hiring cycle, he's probably the #1 head coaching candidate to be hired by any respective NFL team. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of what the Tennessee Titans did a couple of years ago with Mike Vrabel, where he got fired and not too long later, he was one of the top, if not the top head coaching candidate that next hiring cycle. So I think that would be the case for Kevin Stefanski, but given the way that the organization has gone over the last couple of years, you can't necessarily rule it out. Maybe they do decide to just kind of blow the entire thing up. You have ownership this offseason calling the Deshaun Watson trade and extension a big swing and miss. They're putting this roster on notice. They want to see what Kevin Stefanski can do. Of course, the draft was a little weird. You know, you come away with 2 quarterbacks, none of them coming within the first couple of rounds. So you're like, okay, is it really going to be Joe Flacco again? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Is Shador going to come out of the woodwork and actually be your starter despite his free fall in the draft? There's a lot of questions with this team, but overall, I don't think that the reason why this team has not lived up to its expectation, why it hasn't been more competitive in the AFC North, has been because of Kevin Stefanski.
With that, let's welcome in Sam Monson, 33rd team, as well as co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Sam, your thoughts just on Kevin Stefanski, where he's viewed kind of in the hierarchy of NFL coaches, and do you think he's in any danger this year?
Well, I think head coaches in the NFL are always in danger if results aren't there. And it may be harsh, it may not be particularly fair, but it's a results-driven business, and ultimately they are the most expendable of the kind of top-level decision makers, right? You've got head coach, general manager, ownership. Well, ownership isn't going to fire itself, so you've only got 2 places to direct your ire if you decide that heads need to roll after a given season: the general manager or the head coach. Maybe, you can placate them by firing a coordinator or a lower level coach, but generally speaking, when somebody has to be held accountable, it tends to be the head coach. But I think Stefanski has built up a lot of credit in terms of what he's already done, in his coaching career with this team. I agree with the clip there that he would be an extremely attractive head coaching candidate if he was fired from the Browns. And ultimately, I think a lot of it rests on that dynamic with Deshaun Watson and ownership. To what extent was this an ownership-driven, decision, an ownership-driven swing of the bat that ultimately missed and whiffed and resulted with the situation that they're in right now? If that was a Jimmy Haslam-led swing at the bat, and he, acknowledges that and is aware of that, then I think Andrew Berry and Stefanski probably have some decent amount of, room in this, because there will be an understanding that this is not really their fault, right? We are in a bad situation that I put us in, so I can't really hold you guys responsible for that. And they put themselves in a position where, they're kind of aiming at next season. You look at what they did in the draft, in particular, coming out with 2 first-round picks next year. They've bought themselves time with the quarterback situation this year, but they're really positioned to go after one in next year's draft. And so that all speaks to a longer-term strategy than, if we don't win X number of games this season, we're going to have to fire Stefanski.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I'd add to that, if they were the thing you don't do if you feel like you're in trouble, either as a GM or head coach, is you don't draft a defensive tackle at 5 overall. You make a bigger splash and you go get the unicorn, the wide receiver cornerback. What do you think of the Browns draft overall? Just what they came away with.
I like the draft. I think if you're going to criticize it, you would criticize it because they didn't necessarily hit the biggest and most acute position needs. But there's a few drafts where I think that's the case. And that's why you don't like going into the draft with these glaring needs, because if you want to draft best player available, you're not always going to hit those specific positions that you need to get filled. But you look at just the players that Cleveland came out of this draft with, and I think this is a phenomenal haul. Mason Graham is, I think, one of the players in this draft. You could argue that he was a blue chip player. There were people before the process began and we saw his measurements and his combine testing that said this guy was the best player in the draft period, regardless of position. That then sort of became Travis Hunter in the consensus. But if you're going to give up Travis Hunter and get a first-round pick next year in return, and some more stuff, then I think Mason Graham is an excellent way to turn and a guy to bring in instead. The linebacker Carson Swessinger, I think he was going to be an extremely coveted player in this draft, where it was not a particularly good linebacker draft in terms of depth. Once he showed up at the combine, 240 plus pounds, and posted the kind of workout numbers that he did with his tape, I think he was going to be extremely coveted. And then, I think the players that they brought in at running back and the swings that they took at quarterback are good gambles to take to try and shore up those positions, which were acute needs.
So one of the surprise picks was Dylan Gabriel, third round for the Browns. Tom Pelissaro on what he sees when he looks at Dylan Gabriel.
When you are taking a quarterback in the mid-rounds, you're doing it based on traits. None of these guys are surefire starters. If they were, they would have gotten drafted up high in the draft. With Dylan Gabriel, he's really, really accurate, but he's short. He's like my height, and there's real questions about, okay, a guy who was that productive at the college level, everybody's bigger, everybody's faster, how can he function? They clearly liked him. He's like the best comp that I would give you, Rich, is he's like a mini Tua Tagovailoa. Can he go and function at the NFL level? We're going to find out.
Sam, what did you think of Gabriel? It's got I think it's 18,000 yards. He's got a bunch of TDs, started a lot of games, played at a number of programs too.
Yeah, I like Dylan Gabriel. I thought he has the talent to potentially be a starter down the line. Look, when you're drafting a quarterback in the mid-rounds in today's NFL, he's probably a backup. I mean, that's just the reality of the world. And I think Tom's right. Teams are taking those guys and they're shooting for traits and who's got potential NFL starting traits. But effectively, everybody in that range of the draft is deemed as a backup caliber quarterback. But if you were betting on one of those guys to outperform that expectation and to actually become a surprise starter down the line, Dylan Gabriel would have been the guy that I would bet on. He is short, and that's his big deficiency. But he actually, unlike a lot of other short quarterbacks, he's got a real arm to him, like a plus arm, not just marginal or above average arm. He's got a strong arm. He's more athletic than he's given credit for. He may be short, but he's stocky. He's powerfully built and he has got athleticism and he can make plays with his legs. So, there's some things to tidy up with his game, but I think the physical tools are there for him to become a starting quarterback down the line. And he's been a pretty good playmaker in multiple different colleges throughout his college career. So I like the gamble of Dylan Gabriel in the mid-round as a guy that, could start this year sooner rather than later if they need him to, and could potentially win himself a starting job if given that opportunity.
So you look at the Browns and they draft two running backs. We alluded to it. Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State, Dylan Sampson. How do you think they complement each other? How do they fit in what will likely be Kevin Stefanski's wide zone and with the pin and pulls, just his running styles with the fit with what we expect the Browns to go back to this year?
Well, Ohio State used Quinshon Judkins as the hammer within that offense. He's a big, powerful, strong, fast running back, really impressive physical specimen, and they would just sort of power him into the line and let him use that speed and athleticism and power, and oftentimes just run into people and try and bowl right over the top of them. He's very good at that. I think there's a bit more to his game if they opened up his role, but they had Travion Henderson as well, and he could do a lot of the other things. Sampson is much more of an obvious kind of situational back. He's much smaller, much lighter, probably can't take the same kind of workload. But I actually think he's got a kind of more dynamic skill set where he's got more moves. He can string them together sequentially. He's not just a kind of one move guy. He can go from spin to juke to hurdle to footwork to power when he needs to and string it all together. You just probably don't want him taking a certain level of workload over the course of a game or even a season. So I think they complement each other really well. I would love to see Judkins a little bit more, try and head for space rather than head right at the body that's trying to tackle him and try and run right over the top of him. But as a kind of thunder and lightning combination, I think they could be really, really good within the same backfield.
Before we go to break, were you surprised that they didn't draft a wide receiver? The wide receiving room, they've added Deontay Johnson since, but it's a wide receiver room that's got Jerry Jeudy and a lot of question marks, and now Deontay Johnson and a lot of question marks.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson, who is a big question mark himself, given the last couple of years of his career. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, in any given draft, I would be surprised if a team does not come out of it with at least one wide receiver, because that's just the nature of today's NFL and the college game, where, maybe you're not getting the true superstars at the top of the first round every single season, but you are getting just a ton of wide receiver prospects entering the NFL every single season. And if you have a bunch of draft picks, I would always be trying to come out of the draft with one of those guys somewhere, even if it's only on day 3, and, just draft an athlete, draft a guy that you think has tools. So, yeah, I mean, a little bit unusual for this team not to do that. I do think, as much as there's a ton of question marks, as you said, in this receiving core, we also don't really know that much about it because the quarterback situation has been so bad. So I think obviously a really good wide receiver core will help any quarterback look good and try and maximize the chances of one of those guys being good. But the flip side is true as well. Like, as soon as the Browns find a quarterback, we might get a much better idea of what this group is capable of as a receiving core. I mean, a lot of people like Cedric Tillman when he was coming out. I really like Jamari Thrash in terms of his potential. I can't remember whose tape I was going through this draft process, but I was looking at a cornerback or something, and I was looking at 2023 tape and just watching Jamari Thrash, barbecue this guy in the red zone. It's like, that guy's got some talent, and we didn't really see that much of it as a rookie. So I think the whole group is kind of still a bit unknown, in part because we haven't seen them with a plus quarterback situation yet.
Sam Monson from the 33rd team, as well as the Check the Mic podcast. Now, I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We will continue talking Browns roster. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Hey, Olo, are there any lunch specials near me?
You want to learn about Ohio Lottery's Pick 3?
No.
Okay, Pick 3 is a daily draw game.
Cancel.
Where players pick 3 individual numbers between 0 and 9. The numbers can be played straight, where they must be drawn in an exact order, or boxed, where they can be drawn in any order. It's quick to play.
I just want lunch.
Players can win hundreds, and wagers start at 50 cents. The next drawing is coming up. Want directions to the nearest Ohio Lottery retailer?
Yes. One that serves food.
We continue talking Browns with Sam Monson from the 33rd team. Chris Sims talking about free agent wide receiver Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen, I mean, you said it right. He made $20 million last year. He was traded from the Chargers to the Bears just because of that contract, period. He's not going to see anything like that. Those days are over as far as $20 million type of contracts. So that's got to be an aspect here. He still can play, there's no doubt, but he's not a guy that's going to just line him up on the outside and say, oh, he'll beat everybody. He's a slot receiver. That's what he is.
So, Sam, is Allen a guy that you could see the Browns potentially being interested? Would a veteran be interested in coming in here? Because if you go and produce, you would think the opportunity is there to get some snaps and to earn a significant role.
Yeah, I think there is. Last season, I think, showed a fairly steep decline in what he can do. I think Chris is right. He's definitely a slot guy now, a big slot receiver who does have route running chops, who's got a good release package, who's got good hands, who can make plays. But his days of being that kind of high volume, high impact receiver are probably gone. I think it's going to come down to kind of what his interest looks like. As we get closer to the season, how many teams are calling, how many teams are giving him the opportunity. The Browns, given where they are right now in terms of that quarterback situation, it's not a great spot for a guy like Keenan Allen. But if they're the only kind of team that's making the phone calls, maybe he'll decide that is the place to go.
So I mentioned the Browns didn't draft any wide receiver, didn't draft any offensive linemen. This is from Yardbarker. Players that benefited the most from the draft. DeJuan Jones, offensive tackle, who played pretty well as a rookie, got hurt, hasn't made it through either season he's been in the NFL healthy. Cedric Tillman, again, was starting to play really well, and then a concussion held him out. Can you see both of those guys kind of taking a step forward?
I mean, the opportunity is there for them to do that. DeJuan Jones, I think, has shown he has the talent to do that at this level. We just need the consistency. We need to see him do that over the course of a full season. And then, yeah, like I said, Cedric Tillman's got a lot of admirers and did at draft time and was starting to show some things at the NFL level as well. Yeah, both guys have got a huge opportunity this season because they didn't draft competition. They didn't draft guys to come in and take that job. they're going to have a shot to show that they belong and they can do those things. I think each guy definitely has the potential to do that, but now it's the time to show it.
So this is from CBSSports.com. They're ranking the worst quarterback rooms in the NFL. Worst is the Steelers, Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, Skylar Thompson. Aaron Rodgers thought to be headed there. We'll see. Colts, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, Riley Leonard, Jason Bean. Then they have the Browns, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders. Is there a quarterback of the four? We'll exclude Deshaun Watson for the purposes of this discussion. Is there one of those four that you could see working out and giving the Browns, I won't say elite, but competent quarterback play for a consistent period of time?
I mean, I feel like they have to roll into the season trying to let one of those rookies win that job. Joe Flacco was a fun story when he came off the couch and was able to be productive, but not necessarily great within this offense. Kenny Pickett has already shown there's a fairly defined ceiling to how good he can be at the NFL level. I think they need one of those young guys to earn that job and to at least give them competent level play. Again, just to get to next offseason. They are there to buy time. I think if either one of them works out and overperforms expectations and genuinely wins the starting job going forward, that's a fantastic bonus, and that's the kind of lottery tickets they've bought with those day 3 picks or day 2 and day 3 picks. But realistically, they're there to just be able to buy them time to get to next offseason where they can use 2 first-round picks to go up to the top of the draft and, get whoever the quarterback is there that they believe can be the franchise guy going forward. So, I think if they can have one of those 2 guys show up and say, that guy looks like he can start for at least the majority of the season and give us viable quarterback play, that's what we're shooting for. So that I think is what this training camp, the offseason competition should be geared around. It's giving both those rookies as much opportunity as possible to effectively win a starting job and at least give them the chance to go through the season and see if they can win a starting job going forward long term.
So when you look at the Browns' defense, they add Graham and Schlesinger with their first 2 picks, and they already had Garrett, they had Ward, JOK. They might have. How good can that unit be?
I mean, I think it can be very good. We've seen before that it's capable of being an extremely high-level defense, maybe a bit boom or bust, maybe a little high variance, but extremely talented, extremely difficult to stop. They've still got the majority of those pieces in the house. Mason Graham, as I said, I think on the field, he's got some of the best tape of any player from this entire draft class. He was an absolute one-man wrecking ball for the Michigan defensive line. He had help alongside him, but he was by far their best player consistently. Plugging him in next to Myles Garrett should make a huge impact. Garrett will keep attention away from him. He'll be able to draw some of the attention away from Myles Garrett, and the 2 of them will work in concert. Myles Garrett will get more opportunities because Mason Graham is going to be pushing the pocket in the middle and providing an interior push that they haven't necessarily had consistently for the last few years. So, yeah, I think this group has the potential to be very good again, and they've added athletic, potential playmakers to the defense.
How much of a concern is the offense? Is that I look and see a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, I mean, there's question marks basically at every unit on the offensive side, whether it's receiving core, the backfield, the offensive line, or quarterback. All of them are at least to some degree or other worrisome, depending on which group you're talking about. But I do think the potential is there for pretty much all of them to be better than they look on paper. The running back room could easily be very good right out of the gate with the 2 rookies. The offensive line could easily be a perfectly serviceable unit as a collective. There's still a lot of talent there from when it was at its best and one of the best lines in the NFL. The 2 rookies that they drafted a quarterback, I think each are worth a roll of the dice. If one of them can win that job, the quarterback play might be okay. And then again, that receiving core, a lot of questions there, but we don't know what it looks like when they're given pretty high-level quarterback play. So, yeah, it's definitely question marks at every single unit. And when that's true, the chances are 1 or 2 of those units will be a problem this season. It's unlikely that all of them end up hitting the optimistic range of outcomes that they have. So, generally this offense is probably going to be looking at being an average at best unit.
Sam Monson from the 33rd team, as well as Check the Mic podcast. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time, the insight. Appreciate it, Sam.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Sam Monson, make sure you check him out. He is the co-host of the Check the Mic podcast, also works for the 33rd team. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle-Telegram, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Hey, Olo, are there any lunch specials near me?
You want to learn about Ohio Lottery's Pick 3?
No.
Okay, Pick 3 is a daily draw game.
Cancel.
Where players pick 3 individual numbers between 0 and 9. The numbers can be played straight, where they must be drawn in an exact order, or boxed, where they can be drawn in any order. It's quick to play.
I just want lunch.
Players can win hundreds, and wagers start at 50 cents. The next drawing is coming up. Want directions to the nearest Ohio Lottery retailer?
Yes. One that serves food.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi asked the question, is it more likely Kenny Pickett is the starter week 1 for the Browns or gets traded?
It's hard to predict a trade. Someone's got to want him, but I would think that would be the most graceful exit out of this situation without cutting anyone.
And then we go with Flacco and the 2 kids.
I guess. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Tony!
In order for Pickett to be traded, Shador and Dylan Gabriel have to look good to be able to trust, if you're going to have to use them. And we know they probably will, the way things are going.
Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle-Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com. Scott, this is kind of a fascinating thing. I kind of think if everything works out the way the Kevin Stefanski's planning, Kenny Pickett's the starter week 1. I think that's kind of the way they were leaning. They could have signed Flacco and they traded for Pickett.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting because I would agree that he's a favorite to start week 1. I also think he's probably the most likely to get traded by week 1. So, it's kind of just tells you the state of the Browns quarterback situation. I could see that happen, and I could see Pickett playing well and the rookies looking okay, and the Browns try to trade Flacco. Probably not trading one of the rookies, I wouldn't think. But I really do think a lot of scenarios are in play in that quarterback room.
Yeah, and the theory would be Pickett's younger. He was a former first-round pick. If he looks good, somebody might think, yeah, we can fix him, and then we've got some. Dane Brugler ranked the 2025 draft classes in The Athletic. So he had the Patriots 1, Browns 2, Seahawks 3, Steelers 4, and Giants 5th. Brugler's a Northeast Ohio guy. That has nothing to do with that. I think he's one of the better draft analysts around. I know you wrote an article, Good, Bad, and the Dramatic from a wild draft weekend. Take us through that article and kind of what you liked, what had you scratching your head.
Yeah, I'd like to trade down from 2 to 5. I thought you had to do that given getting the first-round pick in 2026 and then number 36 high in the second round. I thought that made it worth it, especially when you're not giving up on a quarterback. They're passed on Travis Hunter, but it's not a quarterback. I liked Quinshon Judkins a lot. Maybe that was a little too high at 36, but I like the player a ton. I like Dylan Sampson, the running back from Tennessee, a bunch, especially where they got him in the 4th round. Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end from Bowling Green. That was a huge need in my eyes, and they went and got a top 5 tight end in the 3rd round. I like that. And I like the trade for Sanders. I like Shedeur Sanders. I liked him as a prospect coming into the draft, and I think that's great value. Where I quibble is Carson Schwessinger at the top of the 2nd round. I just don't like linebacker that high. And Dane Brugler disagreed. He thought that was the Browns' best pick. So it's probably why he would have the Browns rated 2nd in his, when he looked at all the drafts. And then Dylan Gabriel, obviously you have to give him a chance, and maybe I'll be proved wrong. I just, in general, I'm not a fan of short quarterbacks. I think it's just really tough for them to succeed. Not that it can't be done, but a lot of things need to be right. They need to be almost perfect in a bunch of other ways. So, and I think you got Dylan Gabriel later than number 94. So those were my 2 biggest quibbles, was Schlesinger and then Gabriel where they got him.
Yeah, those would be the ones that I just scratched my head about. You also wrote an article, Shedeur Sanders visits John Marshall High School to talk to students. Take us through that article and just kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to frame it in, the backdrop of why did he fall in the draft? And there are a lot of teams that apparently had issues with how he interviewed and thought maybe he was arrogant or entitled or brash. Those are the words you hear thrown about from anonymous NFL sources. So I think the interview he did with us, the local media, Saturday after he was drafted, he talked about all he wanted was a chance, how his job was to prove, Mr. Barry and Mr. Stefanski right for taking him. He didn't seem bitter at all about the drop into the 5th round, and he easily could have been, but it was more about grateful for the chance. And then he comes to Cleveland when, rookie minicamp doesn't start till this Friday and Saturday. And he was here a week ago, Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was. But early last week, he worked out. He ran hills outside. He worked out at an area gym. He goes to John Marshall and gives a talk and answers questions and signs autographs for these Cleveland kids. And whatever, who knows what the motivation is. And I know people are cynical, but he talked about wanting to have an impact in the community and have an effect on these kids. And he does it within the first couple of days after being drafted. I think it's just a really good start for a guy that hasn't taken a snap yet. I think it's a really good start.
Yeah, and again, nobody's going to know the motivation for it. No one will. So, you judge what you see. So far, what we've seen, he's worked, and he wants to be involved with the community. This is concerning. News today comes out that Devin Bush arrested and charged simple assault, harassment in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Team spokesman said the Browns are aware and gathering more information. That's a position that's, Schlesinger was drafted. We don't know about JOK. In limited, Devin Bush looked like he was a good player, so they got to work through this.
Yeah, and the Browns have shown, I would say, a tendency to let the legal situations play out without rushing to judgment. They did it with Mike Hall Jr. last year. And, and a lot of things go into play from how a team handles things. Are you a 2nd-round pick like Mike Hall Jr. was? Perrion Winfrey had a couple issues, and then they cut him. I would think that they would let this situation play out, go through the courts, see how it winds up being decided, see if the NFL intervenes, because the NFL looks into all these off-the-field situations, especially, this is a domestic incident that raises the NFL's radar even more, gets their attention even more, can lead to harsher penalties. So I think the Browns will probably let it go for a while before they make a decision, and then talk to Devin Bush and do their own investigation and see if it's, how they want to play it. Do they, can they discipline him? Do they just decide they don't want him anymore? I don't get that feeling right now. But we'll have to see how it plays out. But obviously, that's not why you want to be in the news if you're a team. They made the decision to bring him back in March for a 2nd season. And like you said, they were shorthanded a linebacker, and then they re-signed him. They brought in Jerome Baker. They draft Schlesinger. So, let's take JOK out of the equation. That feels like you're starting 3 right there. So Devin Bush, if something happened, if they cut him, if you suspended, whatever, would be a loss.
Yeah, without question. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, We'll talk a little bit more about Shedeur Sanders. Head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Well, guys, our owner got what he wanted. All they do is talk about Sanders. All that does is deflect how bad his team really is. We didn't address the offensive line. That's a shambles. We didn't address the wide receivers. We didn't address the safeties. But we got Sanders. Where do you think he's going to take us? Nowhere. We'll probably end up getting rid of a better quarterback because they're not going to be able to get rid of Sanders because the owners won't let them. So you guys can talk as much as you want about this guy, but that's not the reason why we got him. This guy's terrible. We're terrible. We got a long way to go. Think for the owner. We're going nowhere, guys. Take care.
Sunshine and Roses portion of our show. Scott, I don't buy, and we'll get a little deeper into it. I don't buy first of all, Shedeur Sanders is a fifth-round pick. if you're in trouble because you didn't hit on a fifth-round pick, okay, I just don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, in the fifth round, it's hard to argue, I think, with any pick. I understand Andrew Berry talking about the value of that position in the fifth round. I would think that he was by far the highest player on the draft board, so it would make sense to make a move and take Shedeur Sanders there, and even if you have to give up 2 low-round picks to move up, which he did. We've talked about it a million times. I like him. I think he's got a chance to succeed in this league. But I do think the caller's point about offensive line, safety, and receiver are legitimate. And where do you point? You can point to linebacker 33. You can point to doubling up on running back and doubling up on quarterback. When I look at quarterback, I question the Dylan Gabriel pick more than I do the Shedeur Sanders pick and wonder, okay, could you have gotten somebody, let's say 94, if you know Sanders is going to be 144, could you have gotten a starting safety at 94? And I think the answer is probably yes. That's where I would nitpick. It wouldn't be the Sanders pick.
Yeah, again, in the fifth round, I don't know that you're going to get a wide receiver that amounts to much, or a tackle or a safety. So, but your point is valid. If you would have switched it around a little bit, I get that. So the notion that Jimmy Haslam affected the pick of Shedeur Sanders, Tom Pelissaro, NFL Network insider, talking about that.
In real time, as I was talking to people after the Shedeur Sanders pick, it was made abundantly clear to me, Rich, this was not Jimmy Haslam pushing for this pick. This was Andrew Berry doing what a lot of GMs do as you get further in the draft. It's that one name that you've got the higher grade on, and he's still on the board, and eventually you're just like, well, we don't have a need at the position. Certainly the Browns have a broader macro need at the position, but we already drafted a guy, we signed a guy, we traded for Kenny Pickett. Why would we do this? But if you've got, and I don't know their exact grade on him, they obviously didn't have a high enough grade on him to take him over Dylan Gabriel, who they got in the third, or over those other 6 picks, but it's fair to say they had a high enough grade, then why would you not take another bite at the apple?
And again, I get why people question it, but Jimmy Haslam isn't behind every move that Andrew Berry makes. He might be behind
every bad move.
Hey, if you're Andrew Berry, you got to love that. But I mean, with the Sanders or the Sanders pick, I don't think he was involved in. I don't think he gets involved in that level of it. With Watson, he probably guaranteed the contract, which is the most problematic thing of it. But again, he's not stepping into football. He's saying, "I'll spend money to guarantee it if you want to make that happen."
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I would never rule it out because I do think weird things happen in not just the Browns draft room, but a lot of draft rooms across the league. There's, you can call it meddlesome. You can say just involved owners, and it's their team and it's their money. And if they want to make a decision, they can. So, if Jeremy Haslam stood up and said, hey, let's draft this guy, I don't know if, does Andrew Berry put up a fight? Maybe if he doesn't like Shedeur Sanders. But I do think Andrew Berry likes Shedeur Sanders to some degree, like Pelissaro said. And I think Kevin Stefanski as well. I think the organization had him ranked high enough that it made sense at 144. I would never rule it out. And the reason I'm not ruling it out is why people jump to that conclusion is because Jimmy was involved and maybe got into the middle of things early on as an owner. And you just flash back to Johnny Manziel, and it felt like his fingerprints were all over that one. And people have long memories. It's 11 years later, and people still want to connect those dots.
Yeah, and I can't argue with it. I don't believe it. I'm kind of like you. I'll listen to it, but I think people are having him more involved than he is. We've talked about the Dillon Gabriel pick. This might be one of the funniest things I've seen regarding Dillon Gabriel.
This is where all the boys would get together, at least in the neighborhood. Wanted to talk story, hang out, check out the view. That bird back there.
What are they saying?
Cleveland Browns, 94, that's what he said.
Okay.
Cleveland Browns.
With the 94th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select Dillon Gabriel.
Oh my God.
Hey man, how we doing?
Amazing now.
We're pumped for you. We're pumped for your family.
Again, he's from Hawaii, so the bird call is pretty fascinating. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna have to ask him about that this weekend to see, was it the bird telling him or a little birdie had told him, that if he was still around at 94, that's where the Browns liked him. But it's a pretty cool story, though.
Yeah, and again, he's from the island of Hawaii. A ton of production in college, so we'll see if it can translate. So the Browns got a couple of nice running backs in the draft. I think we both like Judkins and Sampson. They got Harold Fannin. They didn't draft a wide receiver. They, after the draft, signed Deontay Johnson. So there are some free agent wide receivers still available. Here's the list of them. Keenan Allen, and you see these are career production numbers. So Allen's 33, 66 touchdowns in his career. Mary Cooper's still out there. He's 30, 64 career touchdowns. Aguilar's 31. DJ Chark's 28. Tyler Boyd is 30. Jamison Crowder is 31. Any of those guys intrigue you at all?
Yeah, you know what? I always liked DJ Chark. Those numbers don't scream out at you. They're the worst numbers on that board, but he's also the youngest guy. I always thought he had some potential. Frankly, I think any of those guys intrigue me, given the state of this receiver room. I think they need to get better. I think they need to get more experienced in that room. I mean, you have, outside of Jerry Jeudy, now they have Deontay Johnson, who you question, coming off a terrible year. He had the issue in Baltimore. Can you really count on him? So Jerry Jeudy. And then to me, it's a bunch of question marks. So could you use a guy like Keenan Allen, who's played a ton in this league? I don't hate that idea. He's probably too expensive for what the Browns want to pay. But Chark and Boyd off that list, those are the two guys I like. I've always liked Amari Cooper. I still like him. I just think the way it ended here, I question whether or not the Browns would be in a hurry to bring him back.
Yeah, I think you add one more veteran and kind of just let it play out, see how it goes. Scott Petrak, is always great stuff. Thanks so much for the time, the insight. Appreciate it, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Brownzone.com on the internet. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle-Telegram. Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter, straight ahead. We're talking Cavs Pacers. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Hey, Olo, Are there any lunch specials near me?
You want to learn about Ohio Lottery's Pick 3?
No.
Okay, Pick 3 is a daily draw game.
Cancel.
Where players pick 3 individual numbers between 0 and 9. The numbers can be played straight, where they must be drawn in an exact order, or boxed, where they can be drawn in any order. It's quick to play.
I just want lunch.
Players can win hundreds, and wagers start at 50 cents. The next drawing is coming up. Want directions to the nearest Ohio Lottery retailer?
Yes. One that serves food.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Fell behind the Pacers in their Eastern Conference semifinal series, 1-0. Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley. What happened in Game 1 and adjustments for Game 2?
They made shots. We got to be better defensively. Offensively, we didn't make shots, and you got to give them credit. But it's not easy to go 16-0, so we got to find a way, and respond. That's the biggest thing. Nothing to hang our heads about. We'll be fine, and we'll be better.
For either one of you guys, what, if anything, can you do to get the pace more in your favor and dictate terms in a way that maybe you couldn't tonight?
I think there's a few adjustments. Definitely going to talk about tomorrow. And I think a lot is to do with defensively, getting a bit more stops, and get out and transition in our favor. And then offensively, how we could score just easier and just keep attacking. It helps to make shots and slows their transition up as well. So just talk about different adjustments we're going to make.
Let's welcome in Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So, Ethan, we'll talk about Game 1 in a minute, but we find out today that Garland, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, all questionable. I know you were out there. What's the most recent and kind of your feeling on those three?
It's not a good look, right? So obviously we understood that Darius Garland's toe injury. There was already reason for concern for that, even going into Game 1. Obviously he sat out, and then going into Game 2. We still haven't seen Darius really. Like, he practiced, he went through a full-on practice on Friday, didn't practice on Saturday, and then didn't really get an update from Kenny Atkinson on Darius Garland's availability after today's practice. And it was surprising to me that they had practice at all, right? Throughout this entire regular season, the Cavs rarely, and I mean, I might be able to count it on one hand how many times they have practiced immediately after a game, right? So it was not only like trying to get into the film room and stuff, but they simply wanted to get shots up. And I know we're going to get into that a lot. But also DeAndre Hunter dislocated his thumb on his shooting hand on the fall when he collided with Benedict Mathurin in the game. And then Evan Mobley tweaked his ankle when he came down from a jump shot and landed on Miles Turner's ankle because he didn't give him enough room to land. Kenny Atkinson was not happy with these two plays that ended up being non-calls, and even though they reviewed the DeAndre Hunter foul, or not foul, actually, when we talk about that layup. So I just think this team is in a very, very crazy state right now. They're trying to be very cool, calm, and collected about it, but they understand 3 arguably starter caliber players could be out for Game 2, and they're still waiting to find out the severity of Donovan Mitchell's knee because he was laboring as well in Game 1.
So you mentioned Mitchell, 30 shots, and he was 1 of 11 from three-point range, but man, he got in the paint, and is that something you think the Cavs can build on? Is that kind of one of the things Evan Mobley was talking about?
I hope not. I really hope they don't have to. They build on that because I mean, Donovan, sure, you had 33 points. He becomes the only player in NBA playoff history to have 8 consecutive game ones in the playoffs where he scores 30 points or more. That's all good and well, but they lost the game, right? And Donovan felt like he had to take 30 shots. It was reminiscent of what happened last year when Donovan had to carry this team. And then you see it again, the overcompensation, the overexhaustion that led to a lingering knee injury that he was dealing with last year into a calf injury. Now you're telling me that he's not going to be at 100%, even though Kenny Atkinson and Donovan Mitchell dodged the question about his injury because they know they're going to need him. So sure, you can tell me that he had a great game from the interior, and he was a guy that we know last year when he was injured didn't get to the inside. He was more so trying to execute from long range. But if you're shooting 1 of 11, you kind of have to go into the interior if the shot's not falling. So I don't necessarily think that's a good sign for the Cavs. I wrote about that for an article today about how it was a warning sign that this is not only reminiscent of last year, but the Cavs have to rely on the system that has gotten them here, right? The assists, the play on offense got sticky. The ball wasn't moving. Sure, they ended up with 25 assists as a team, but it didn't feel like the flow of the offense was moving as fluidly as it has been throughout the year. They had 2 players combined for 50 shot attempts. The Indiana Pacers as a team took 83. That's too many, even if you're Donovan Mitchell, even if you're going to be an all-NBA player, even if you're a 6-time All-Star. I just don't think that's acceptable, and he shouldn't have to feel like he has to do all of that just for the Cavs to be in the game. And at the end, in the fourth quarter, he wasn't able to even get back on defense because he was so tired. That, on top of dealing with the pace of the Pacers, it's not a good sign for game 2 if the Cavs can't make an adjustment.
So the other thing that jumps out, they were minus 30 from three-point range. Pacers made 19 shots from three-point range. Cavs only made 9. Is that just one of those nights for the Cavs, or is it the Pacers speeding them up?
I think it's both. I think you can point to the fact that this was their second worst three-point percentage all season long. It was also the fewest three-pointers they had made all year. The next closest was 10. I just think this was a game where they couldn't get their legs under them, right? And even when they had open looks, they were so exhausted from getting up and down the floor. They talked about how the pace and the speed of the Pacers was going to affect them, but I don't think they really knew it until they got onto the floor with them. We talked about this last week about how the Pacers and the Cavs faced off 4 different times in the regular season, but none of those games had all of the players that are on the floor right now. There was either Tyrese Halliburton was out, Darius Garland was out, Donovan Mitchell was out, DeAndre Hunter hadn't been traded for yet. So I think this is a reality check for the Cavs, and there was an understanding coming into the series that the Cavs were a little bit worried about the Pacers. I don't know if worry is the right word, but they're understanding of the challenge that they face, their length, their speed, their ability to score the basketball. All of these things that the Pacers are capable of doing puts the Cavs in a precarious situation in a season that where they've been dominant, and now they're facing a team that not only has the personnel to keep up with them, but they have the speed and the style of play to do it as well, and to spread their offense out to make it a lot more difficult on a Cavs defense that simply hasn't been the same since trying to up their offensive growth throughout the year.
So one stat that I'll point to, Cavs outscored the Pacers 70-38 in the paint. How do they maximize that? If you're Kenny Atkinson, you got to look at that and go, okay, how do we bludgeon you?
I don't think it matters. Like, I think it's important that Jared Allen and Evan Mobley attack the paint viciously and aggressively. But if you get outscored by 30 on the three-point line, right, it becomes a math problem, right? 3 is more than 2. We all know this. We all been to kindergarten. I just think it's hard to put yourself in this situation where not only are you not being able to maximize the offense because you're playing from behind, you're playing catch up, and now the opposing team is still firing up these threes, but defensively, like Jared Allen and Evan Mobley aren't as fast as guys like DeAndre Hunter and Dean Wade. They're not able to get back on defense as quickly, right? And also you talk about Jared Allen, who has been huge throughout this entire season. He was great in the first round against Miami, but this is a series where, and I've mentioned this before, this is a series where Jared Allen's minutes might get cut a little bit because he's being put into actions. He's being attacked by Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, and he's on the perimeter. And as much as he wants to say that he's trying to get comfortable in those scenarios, it's uncomfortable for him. He hasn't had to do that a lot this season. It's more so been, hey, opposing teams are going to attack Darius Garland, Ty Jerome. You're not going to attack a player that's potentially on the all-defensive team, whether it's first or second. We're still waiting to find out, right? I think that's crazy for him to think about. Like, I'm one of the best defenders on this team, and yet you're going to attack me? It's interesting to see how the Pacers have put the Cavs on their heels and made it a point that if you're going to play this two big lineup, you have to find a way to maximize it on the offensive end, whether that's setting screens off ball to get other shooters open. But again, that comes back to my original point. If the Cavs aren't making shots, and unfortunately for them, it's been like that all year. They're a make or miss league. They're a do or die league from the 3-point range. The Cavs had 9 losses this season when they shot below 32% from deep. They only lost 18 games. So I think it's important for them to not only continue the aggressiveness in the interior, but even more so, they just got to make shots.
So is that the message from Kenny Atkinson and what needs to change in Game 2?
Physicality. They were out-toughed again. And it's hard for me to continue to have this conversation where we keep saying that the Cavs aren't too soft, right? They've grown. They've brushed off that narrative a lot in the regular season. But 3 different players talked about it. We were not physical enough. We weren't able to match the physicality of the Pacers. That wasn't supposed to be one of the areas where they were losing against the Indiana Pacers coming into this series. It was supposed to be pace. It was supposed to be speed. But them getting into their bodies, the Pacers getting into the paint, the Pacers getting using driving kicks to get their man open, that was what they relied on to find open looks. And the Cavs defensive rotations need to be much better in Game 2. And I think that's the biggest adjustment from Kenny Atkinson. They got to keep up with the pace. They got to find a way to do that. They have to be more physical. They have to land the first punch. They cannot be reactive. And they just have to maintain the confidence that they played with all year. Sure, if you have multiple players that you rely on out for Game 2, it's going to be hard, but you cannot rely just on Donovan to will your team to a victory. Other guys have to step up around them. That's been the entire system of this team for this year. They have to live by it and show it when it matters most. It can't just be lip service.
Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
Ethan Sands, make sure you check him out. Cleveland.com as well as The Plain Dealer. Always really good Cavs coverage. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.